everyone! Welcome to Secret of My English, a place with all the tips and tricks from a soon-to-be English teacher. Today we're talking about the CPE or Cambridge Proficiency English exam. I took this exam back in November last year and I passed with grade B. I know how daunting it can seem to take such an exam because it's the last existing level in English. It's the level equivalent to that of a native English speaker. So in this video I want to share with you the specific things I did to help me prepare for that exam and go into it with confidence and ease. Okay, before we begin, let me tell you a little bit about the exam. The exam is divided into 4 papers: reading and use of English, writing, listening and speaking. The reading and use of English paper is the one that carries the highest percentage of the total score. It carries a 40% mark, while the other 3 papers each carry a 20%. So I would highly recommend focusing more of your energy in reading and use of English, because you do not need to pass all the papers to pass the CPE exam. If you manage to pass the reading and use of English with a good score, it's very likely that you will pass the exam. Now, before we move on to talk about each of the exam papers and what I did to prepare for those, I want to give you a general, very important tip, which is to gauge where you're at in your English journey. That means taking online tests. There are plenty of those that you can find online, and so take them and see what your result is. But most importantly, see what are the areas that you need to work the most on. For example, if grammar is one of your weakest areas, you need to focus more on grammar. So now let's move on to the specific tips I have for you, and the first one relates to all 4 papers of the exam, and that is taking sample tests. Online you can find sample tests from the C2 exam, reading and use of English. The main tip that I have for you is to read as much as you can, but try and read different types of text. Don't just read what is comfortable for you. For example, don't just read fiction or don't just read articles. Try to vary the type of reading that you do. Try to look for as many different sources as you can. It's very useful for you to familiarize yourself with different types of vocabulary, lexis, and sentence structures. About the vocabulary, when you come across new words, don't just expect that you will remember them by reading, because you most likely won't remember them. What I did is I kept a little notebook where I would write down all of the new vocabulary items that I came across. And not only vocabulary, I also wrote down phrasal verbs and idioms, which are 2 very important parts of the CPE exam, because they make your English sound more advanced, more natural, and that's exactly what examiners want from you. They want an English that's natural, updated, you know? Let me show you the notebook that I used. It's this little notebook right here, and I would write the vocabulary in alphabetical order, but you do not need to write it in order. As long as you write it, that's okay. And also remember to take note of appropriacy. Take note of whether or not the language is formal or informal, in which contexts it is appropriate to use it, and all of that, because that's also very important to remember. For example, with idioms, what I did is write down the idiom itself and as an example sentence right underneath it, so I knew how to use it and in which context. Context is always very important. Let's move on to the writing paper. A useful thing that I did is straight up copy sample writings that I would find online. I copied them to get used to the way they were written, to the time they took to write, because when I write something, I always end up writing more than I need to or less. So studying sample writings was very useful for me. And then I started writing my own writings because you cannot rely on copying other people's work. So what I would do is time myself and see how long it took me to write. The same idea that I told you about in the reading and use of English section applies to writing too. Well, it kind of applies to all of the exam papers. You need to write different types of texts. You need to get used to writing more formal texts, informal texts. Just get comfortable in different using different types of language. That will be very useful because you never know what you will be asked to write in the exam. Another helpful thing to remember about the writing part of the exam is to use compound adjectives. Compound adjectives, such as an English-speaking country, make your English sound more advanced because if you tend to write too much, for example, you say something like a country in which they speak English, you can use a compound adjective to say that same thing with less words. An English-speaking country. Also, remember to use connectors and linking words because those are also very useful in making your writing clearer, easier to read, and more interesting. About the listening part, this one was tricky for me because listening comes after writing, and at least for me, I need a very clear head to listen to a recording and understand as much as I can from it. The main tip that I have for you is get used to different types of accents because it's very easy to get comfortable with one type of accent. The same way that it is easy to get comfortable with one type of reading text, it's also easy to just listen to American people. For example, for me, I'm more comfortable with the American accent because most of the content I consume on YouTube, for example, is made by people with that type of accent. However, I also realized the importance of hearing people from other countries, for example, British people, because you are very likely to have to listen to British people on the listening exam. That's the main tip that I would give you, is to tune your ear into listening to different types of accents and also different speeds, because different people talk at different speeds. And now let's move on to the final part of the exam, but one of the most important ones, and that is speaking. I'm not just going to sit here and tell you to practice because you've probably heard that tip before, and I know it's not easy to just practice speaking, especially when you do not have people to speak with. So that's why the tip I have for you is to copy other people. Yes, copy other people's way of speaking. That's what I did at first. For example, a YouTuber that I admire very much is someone called The English Coach. What I would do is play her videos, hit pause, and repeat exactly what she said in the way that she said it. That helps me a ton with my confidence. However, in the same way that for the writing part you need to produce your own writings, you also need to be able to speak your own ideas in the speaking part. You cannot just memorize other people's ideas and repeat them. They are also looking out for a natural type of speech. They don't want you to just repeat ideas like a parrot, you know? So what you need to do is start speaking. Once you've become comfortable with producing certain sounds in the English language and you think that your speech sounds more or less understandable and smooth, that's when you need to speak your mind. Think about topics that you're interested in and just speak about that, even by yourself. Like I'm doing now, record yourself and then watch it afterwards, listen to yourself and see what you need to work on. If your speech is intelligible, if you use too many filler words, things like that. And as far as the language you will need to use in the speaking part, you don't need to be too formal. Your language can be more relaxed and laid back. As long as you are respectful and you don't use, slang or words like that wouldn't be too appropriate for an exam setting, you can relax. You do not need to use a very formal type of speech. You do not want to sound like Shakespeare, you want to sound like a regular person who is just having a conversation with two other people. Well, for me, I had to do the speaking part with 2 people. We were 3, but normally you are just 2 people doing that exam. It's you and another person, but it's also possible that you have to speak to 2 more people like I did. And also another thing about filler words, they are not forbidden. You can use filler words if you need to. There's nothing wrong with saying a couple of or words like that. You can use them because they help you buy yourself time when you're thinking about what to say next. Just don't rely on them too much. Those are my tips on how I passed the C2 exam. I hope you find it useful. Please let me know which tip was your favorite, or if there was anything that surprised you that I said, or any questions you may have, let me know in the comments below. And with that said, I will see you in my next video. Take care, bye!